Talk about rest, I sleep when I'm dead. Motherfucker wanna come through tripping. Listen, I'ma rip it, I'ma come.
Welcome everybody to TruExact. I'm here with Travis and Chris, and joining us again for the third time, friend of the show, friend of the network. You've probably seen him on The Food That Built America at this point, as a food critic, which is awesome. Congratulations, by the way. It's good to see those STEAMIE awards are paying off. I love it. I can't believe it's been about 8 or 9 months already since we had you on. The one, the only Bill Oakleigh. How you doing, man?
I am doing great. I'm glad to be back here. I still love your shirt, which I wear the TruExact Radio shirt every week, and I drink out of your mug. I drink vodka out of your mug at night. I love it.
Hey,
Thank you, guys. It's great to be back.
That's what it's there for. Just vodka, straight alcohol, whatever you want. Coffee, I don't even know what that is. All right, Bill, before we get going, I know you got a lot of stuff going on, so we'll just have some questions for you. But you did want to plug your Steamed Ham Society. So explain that.
Yes. Okay, so this is basically an online club for people who are into food. That's a simple bottom line thing about it. Like, a lot of people like to post. I know that this is a niche thing, but a lot of people like to post photos of their food or talk about, like, hey, I found this incredible sandwich when I went to North Carolina. You should try it when you go. Things like that. Or like, did you try this new thing from Burger King? It totally sucks. Things like that. So it's a place for people who want to talk about stuff like that to hang out. And we have a Discord which goes 24/7 with stuff like this and everything. Like, and it's not just like, it's like anything from snack food to like fancy recipes. It's like all sorts of stuff like that. Then there's a live stream that I host every month, which is kind of like a talk show where we talk about food stuff. There's a newsletter, which I write talking about what's happened in food in the past month. And then at the higher levels of the club, there are things like there's a lot of merchandise. There's other things. There's be like a special Simpsons chat thing. And then there's even at higher level people with a lot of disposable income where we hang out on Zoom, have a cocktail party, and I send you a box of my favorite snacks every quarter. So for people who want to, people, even if you don't have a lot of money to spend, $5 a month is the cheapest level. It's a lot of fun. Go to steamedhamsociety.com and sign up. I think you'll like it.
All right, perfect. And once again, in classic Bill Oakleigh fashion, always throwing shots at Burger King. He finds a way to do it. Finds a way to do it, no matter what.
Oh, I got a lot more stuff to say about Burger King, but I don't want to take over your podcast with food talk. We'll save that for the Steamed Ham Society. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff to talk about in the Burger King universe these days.
Okay, all right. First, we'll get into some Simpsons stuff here. I remember it's been 2 years since we had you on just to talk about the writing format and whatnot, but you promised to come back, and thankfully you did, to talk about certain episodes. So I do want to get into the Who Shot Mr. Burns one. This is obviously one of the classic episodes of all time. Just if you could go over like the thought process of making that the season finale into the season beginning the next year. Was that like the plan initially, or was it supposed to end after one?
No, that was the plan initially, because this whole thing was just a copy of Who Shot JR, which is way before your time, all you guys and probably all your listeners. But let's just say in the 70s and the 80s, there was a show called Dallas, starring Larry Hagman, which was a primetime soap opera, which was the biggest rated show on TV. One year they had a cliffhanger and it was called Who Shot JR, and the mystery was who shot JR. JR being Larry Hagman, and then the season ended, and then all summer long, all America was talking about who was it, and then the fall premiere, it was revealed. So this was exactly like that, and it wasn't even our idea. When I say our, throughout this entire thing, I mean myself and Josh Weinstein, who's my producing partner. This was actually Matt's idea. Matt Groening came into our office one day and said, "Why don't we do some sort of stunt like Who Shot JR? Who shot Mr. Burns?" And we were like, "Hey, that's a great idea." And so Josh and I made up the whole story for it, and then we took it to the writers and the executive producer David Merkin at that time. We fleshed it out more, and it was obvious from the get-go that it was going to be a two-part thing, because that was the whole point. It was copying what Dallas did.
Now, were you aware that Vegas had odds on Who Shot Mr. Burns?
Okay, this is fake. I'm so glad we get to debunk this.
Okay, go for it. Because I thought it was real. I really thought it was real.
Because you don't think if Las Vegas had odds on Who Shot Mr. Burns, don't you think I would have been in there?
That's true.
Making a fortune? I would have immediately driven to Las Vegas, bet every single cent I had, and it's like, that's why in America it's illegal to bet on things like that. In America, you can't bet on things you can't bet on non-sporting events where the outcome could be known to someone. In England, it is, as a matter of fact. So in England, I think they did have, in England and Ireland, I think they did actually have odds on who it was. But I don't think it was like, I don't think you could bet very much money. You could probably bet like $2 or £2
Okay, gotcha.
or whatever, 2 shillings. And then, but in the Las Vegas odds, they actually didn't have those odds. What they did was they put it up on the screen. I think it was Caesar's Sportsbook for that special. That there was a 1 hour special before Who Shot Mr. Burns. That was that thing hosted by John Walsh before the finale. And so there was just a lot of like celebrities speculating about who it was. It was not done by the show. It was done by the Fox promotions department. And one of the things they did was they went to Caesar's. I think it was the Caesar's Sportsbook, but it might have been the Mirage or something, to just put this up on the screen in the sports book. And they did it for that one shot. That's the end. I'm sorry to debunk your story, but that's what happened.
So if I may, I wanted to like actually ask about that America's Most Wanted episode, because it was like, I was watching that episode when I was like 7, and I was like getting ready for the finale. And I guess that America's Most Wanted episode popped up before the show started. And it was like, I'm 7, so like, I don't like fucking know what's going on. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, why is John Wall? And like, everyone's taking it so seriously. And like the joke completely went over my head when I was a kid. So I wanted to know who's like, was that from you and Josh's idea, or is that like something that somebody from Fox came up with to like have an America's Most Wanted tie-in or something like that?
I'm 95% sure that it was the Fox network that did all that stuff. I don't think that I think that the showrunner at that point, David Merkin, probably assisted them a little bit. But in general, we only did the stuff that was the show. We only did the show. We didn't do promotional stuff. And Fox wanted to make a big event of this, to get the milk the ratings out of it and stuff. So I know that the Fox promotions department did that whole thing, and they may have had a little assistance from the writers or from the showrunner, but I don't think so.
And then I don't think I even watched the premiere that night, because I was like, oh, I guess I got to wait till next week, because I don't know what this is taking up the time slot. So I think I turned it off or something at that point. It was like, oh, it's America's Most Wanted. There's a special on America's Most Wanted or something. So
it was just an attempt to hype up the thing, and also whatever they had at that time at the 7 o'clock slot wasn't doing all that well. So it was just filler. It was promotional filler material that they made, and they did a lot of stuff like that. I mean, all summer long that summer, there was a pretty good amount of like hype about it. And like 7-Eleven, there was like those cups at 7-Eleven there, and they did a good job. I mean, Fox. We had our arguments with Fox all the time, but in terms of promoting that thing, they did a good job. Except obviously the contest, which was such a colossal clusterfuck that they ended up having to just pay the person off who won. It's like, it takes an hour to tell the story, but if you listen to the DVD commentaries, they had a contest with 1-800-COLLECT. This was back before phone service was like the way it is now. And you wanted to make a collect call. You could choose what carrier you wanted to use. So you'd use 1-800, where they were trying 1-800-COLLECT was one, and you call, you make a collect call. It's hilariously antiquated now. Anyway, the contest was with 1-800-COLLECT, and they suffice it to say they couldn't find anybody who had even the most right guess. Even the person that they finally awarded the thing to wasn't a Simpsons watcher, so it didn't want to be animated on the show. So they just paid that person off and suddenly ended the contest.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember like the TV guides having like the Who Shot Mr. Burns thing on it and stuff. Now, I know that obviously Maggie did it. There was supposed to be someone else who did it, or was Maggie the first?
Yeah, Barney. Me and Josh wanted it to be Barney. Here's what happened. This is also covered in the DVD commentary, but Josh and I, the original plan was for it to be Barney, because Barney had already gotten tired. The drunk jokes had already gotten a little tired with Barney. And we were like, well, what if we send him off to jail and he comes back a couple seasons later and he's all different? And so we went to the story conference, which is where all the writers get together with Matt and James L. Brooks. And Brooks, has a real sense for this stuff, because he was like, well, it should be a member of the family. Like, the show is The Simpsons. And like, Barney is such a random person who has no connection to Mr. Burns, that it would just be kind of a random act. And we were like, that's kind of what we wanted. But James L. Brooks suggested that it had to be someone in the family, and like the least likely subject was Meg. And we thought that was dumb because we were like, well, that's a baby. It will be an accident, it'll be coincidence or whatever. But he's the boss. I mean, he's the owner of the show, James L. Brooks. So we went back and the writers were all sitting around and David Merkin suggested, well, we said, we don't like it that it's a baby that did it by accident. And he's like, well, what if it wasn't by accident? And then we realized that thing at the end that Maggie did it intentionally was what convinced us that it would be good. And so that's the thing. And it's all literally just in her eye darting at the end, that conveys that. But that was the reason. And I think it's better. It's more faithful to the spirit of the show that it be someone in the Simpson family. And she was probably the best because she's the least likely.
Yeah.
Right. So I actually had a question with, so the clip show, I guess it's at the end of season 7 where it's the Troy McClure clip show.
Yeah.
So he shows a bunch of other clips where it's like 10 other characters shooting Mr. Burns. Was that like legit thing, or was that like a legit thing where you guys were had the animation just to like throw people off the scent, or is that just like
that's exactly what it was.
Okay.
No, that was exactly what it was. We did that. There was a lot of security around. I mean, for the Simpsons, there was a lot of security around this thing. Like nobody knew. The script was not distributed. Like only the writers in the writers' room and Harry Shearer knew who it was, and David Silverman, who was the head animator. And because the script was only distributed, we never distributed the last 10 pages of the script to anyone. They're all shredded. Then David Merkin recorded 2 endings with Harry, one of which appears in that thing that you're talking about, which is where Smithers did it. Smithers did it, and it's just like, oh, I actually did do it after all, and it's like a lame. And they just improvised that in the sound studio. But we animated that fully, and we animated the Maggie ending, and then for all those other ones, those 8 ones, I think it was you saw Tito Puente and Santa's Little Helper and a Pooh.
It's like
we animated
Tito
those because those we wanted to throw off people who might, guess among the animators. And there's hundreds of animators, both in America and in overseas. So we animated those brief endings. So nobody really truly knew what the real ending was.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like it when, funny shows like The Simpsons or, like a Family Guy or like something that you don't really expect to get into like a deeper kind of a storyline takes over and they do a 2-part episode. Because, you really expect it to be, 20 minutes, you're in and out, you get your laughs in, you're at Sunday night with your family. And then now you're putting in something like this where Who Shot JR, you're doing a spoof on it. And I always love to see like how people are conveyed. Like, I don't know who Homer was supposed to be in Who Shot JR, or because I've never seen that, but I like how everyone always had like,
I haven't either.
Serious reaction. They're like, oh, I want to shoot him because, he took my job, or they're taking the son away. And he's just like, he doesn't know my name. Like, I find that so funny. Because like everyone has to be serious. Probably the most mad.
That's totally built into the show, that thing. That was easy. The harder part was getting people like Tito Puente and Barney to have a motive to shoot him, or Principal Skinner. And so, but that you're totally right. It's very hard. The reason that that's not done is it's hard to do because like these shows, I always found that when sitcoms did 1 hour long episodes, they just weren't very good. And what I'm thinking back to is episodes, things like MASH, in the old days, MASH, Seinfeld, Cheers. They like these shows were constructed, and The Simpsons the same way, are constructed to be half-hour shows. Just the way that the stories are told, the size of the story, the scope of the story, it starts to wear thin after like 35 minutes. Right. And so very few places have done. I mean, I know Family Guy has done it in more recently, and South Park has done it. But it's hard to construct an hour-long story that stays interesting and funny.
Not even that, not even interested in funny, but you brought up like MASH and stuff. I even have trouble because one of my favorite shows ever is The Twilight Zone, which obviously like The Simpsons take stuff from it and then do some spoofs on it. I even have trouble watching the hour-long Twilight Zone episodes. Like I
hear you.
Yeah, I enjoy just the 25-minute, like the How to Serve Man, or like Time Is Not Enough, to where like one commercial you're into it. Like the hour ones, you're just like, oh my god, like this is
we get it.
You know? It's like how much.
That's how I feel about all TV shows now.
Yeah.
Every TV show is too long these days. That's what my opinion.
When I see
like
a movie now that's an hour and 50 minutes, it really takes me a lot to watch it. Like to me, it's like hour 30 minutes or less. That's what I want, you know?
Totally. I mean, I love when I want to see a movie and it's like an hour and 20 minutes or whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the right length for a movie. And for a TV show, like every drama show is now like 85 minutes an episode. And I'm like, Law and Order did pretty well being 48 minutes an episode. And because it's 48 minutes a show, 12 minutes of commercials. I'm perfectly satisfied with that. I don't need to see an hour and a half long episode of your drama show every week.
Right. And to Chris's point, what he said with doing the 2-part, I think what was key to it wasn't continuous. You had to wait a summer. I think like that is really cool. And I'm not sure if a cliffhanger for a cartoon has been done since that I could think of. Maybe Cartman's mom. Remember,
which was literally the same setup.
Yeah.
Like
they didn't
it was
know,
like basically the same
Cartman's
kind of
dad.
episode.
They didn't know who Cartman's dad was. Maybe I don't. Yeah. So that is really cool. Did you expect it to take on a life of its own over the summer, like it did?
Yeah, I think so. Even more so than I think we expected it to be big. Yeah, because that was like, I mean, The Simpsons was pretty big, but it's hard to remember back at that time that Simpsons wasn't that big. Mm-hmm. It's really a weird thing to remember because The Simpsons was huge in 1991, 1992. Like it was in the top 10 shows on TV and there was all that merchandise, the Underachiever and proud of it. You couldn't get away from it. But by the time that we were getting around to season 6, season 7, The Simpsons was always like out of the TV shows, there's 100 TV shows on every week back then. The Simpsons is like number 52. And it's hard to believe too, because like The Simpsons has so outlasted so many of those shows. But, on Sunday night, we never won. We never won at Sunday 8. We always were beaten by Mad About You on NBC, which in retrospect is like, what the fuck? That I couldn't believe that was happening even then. But anyway, so the show was not like, I think we were number 18 that week or something, but it still wasn't like we were the number 1 show on TV.
Yeah.
I always thought that people should be appreciating The Simpsons more than they were at that time because, and kids were appreciating it, but people over like 30 were still in the mindset of like cartoons are for kids. At that time, they really were.
But like, look at it. It's been 30 years since Mr. Burns, who shot things, and most of and you do other work. Like, I'm not taking away from you, but like most of the interviews you do maybe about The Simpsons, right? Still to this day.
It's a singular thing. No, two TV shows have run that long. Like, Meet the Press and Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons, and that's it. Have run that long. So it's a singular thing. And I'm happy to be associated with it. I'm happy that people remember the stuff that we did so fondly.
Yeah.
So, and I can, and then I can continue to make hay out of it with things like the Steamed Ham Society.
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't know if them two want to touch on it, but like the Steamed Ham Society, the Steamed Hams clip. I don't know if we went over it the first time we talked. You mentioned that only took on a life of its own the past 20 years, right? Like, yeah,
the last 8 years, as a matter of fact.
8 years. So when did you just wake up one day and we're getting these notifications like, wow, all this stuff popping up out of nowhere?
Yes, in fact, I won't go into all the details, but some reporter from this online magazine called Mel Magazine did a colossal history of the whole thing, which is very well written and explains basically what happened is it started in Australia when people were calling their supermarkets and asking for steamed hams like as a prank. And the supermarket got on board and like started making these funny videos and like putting up signs in the supermarket that said, we don't sell steamed hams, we do sell ground beef. Like then it took on this thing. I started getting notifications about that. Then people started remixing them. That was the thing that really kicked it into overdrive, was when people started remixing it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And there have been literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of incarnations of it, many of them with millions of views. And that's what kicked it into overdrive until finally in 2018, it was the internet meme of the year. Like you couldn't get away from it. And now I think it's trickled off. People remember it, but it's not like, it doesn't have the same, it's not taken over the internet like it did 4 years ago.
BART versus Australia. How did that get? I know we talked about Chaz Wazers last time and how there was like a book you just happened to like grab and find that word or something like that. It's been a couple of years. I don't remember the specifics, but how did the rating on that one go? Like, because you mentioned like Homer needed an enemy with Frank Grimes, but like, how did BART versus Australia? Why the country Australia?
Okay. There's two different ways that this came about, and it was all came together real fast. One was that you know a lot of the episode, the way the episode titles are on The Simpsons, they're often very simple, like Bart the Lover or Bart versus Thanksgiving, right? And there are a number of Bart versus Thanksgiving, Bart versus blank, right? And at one time, me and Josh were like, well, what's the biggest possible thing that Bart could be versus? And we're like, well, what about an entire continent? And then we're like, hey, wait a minute. And then this was also around the same time that kid in Singapore was getting caned. I don't even remember for this. This was a news story in like 1994 or 95. There was I think he was an American or maybe a Canadian teenager who had gotten caught. I don't remember if he was vandalizing something or he spit gum on the subway.
Gum on something, and it was and it was
they take that real seriously.
It got like became like he spit gum onto like a light pole or something, and like he got like tackled and arrested by the police, and then he got caned for it.
Yeah, it was big news.
Yeah, you got like 20 lashes or something like that.
And in Singapore, the punishment for whatever the crime this teenager committed is caning, which is being whipped with a cane on your butt, I guess. And so like people were shocked. Number one, that this was going to happen to an American or Canadian, as well as how brutal and rather primitive that punishment seems. So we're like, oh my God, that's perfect. It immediately came together in a few minutes. We're like, BART versus Australia. Well, what if BART was playing the role of that kid in Singapore, and it happened in Australia? And then the other writers contributed stuff too. Like I think that Josh and I originally had it that he was going to be caned or spanked or something like that. And the boot, I think it was Dave Merkin who came up with the idea of the boot. And then the rest of it was like, it was pretty simple to write story-wise, because it really is just a story of BART commits a crime in Australia. He has to go to Australia. They're going to cane him. He gets out of it. Like that came together probably in a couple of hours. But then all the other details are just every Australian corny stereotype you can imagine.
Yeah.
Like, because you guys don't remember this probably as well, but like in 86, 87, there was a huge Australian trend in America. Like it started with Crocodile Dundee, the movie Crocodile Dundee. And then there was also a lot of other stuff. Like there were commercials, and there was Olivia Newton-John had a store, and there was Yahoo Serious, and there was Jocko who advertises. Anyway, for about 18 months, Australia was the thing in like 86, 87, 88. So, but then it had declined, and the joke was the Australians didn't like that we no longer, this is covered in the episode, so we just loaded the episode with every corny stereotype you can imagine about Australia and tossed it in there, because also Australians are generally known for having good senses of humor. And so we thought that they would appreciate it. The funny thing is, since then, at the time, I don't think they appreciated it. I think most people were pretty mad at Australia. And we got hundreds of letters from kids, school children, who were like, why did you say this about our country? Like teachers are making them write us letters. But since then, I think that they have all fallen in love with it. And now, like, it is very, like, they sell those flags. They like those flags with the butt being kicked.
Yeah.
Like anytime there's a sporting event or whatever in Australia, you see people waving those flags. And like, there's just like, they've embraced it, which fills me with joy.
Yeah. And what makes that episode so good is it like you said, it's the plot it can be covered in 30 seconds in terms of just what happens, but it really, you guys are just doing joke combos after like over and over just on Australia and everything you can, and you just pack it to the brim, and then they get away on a helicopter and leave. It's just, there hadn't been, I don't think, had the Simpsons been overseas by that point? I don't remember. I know that there was briefly, Homer went to India for the Quickie Mart thing, but I don't think there had been, I know they had done 1 or 2 travel episodes, but I don't think we had been overseas. So we also were able to throw in every other overseas thing, including like the helicopter stuff is all Vietnam War. A lot of that is Vietnam War stuff. Right. Yeah.
The embassy and the helicopter evacuation of the embassy. And so like we were able to toss in a lot of stuff about overseas travel, including like the time zone change and the frog, the tree cane toads or whatever it is in Australia, all that kind of stuff.
What made you think of like the way that the toilet swirls?
I had that question.
Yeah, okay.
I actually didn't know that was a real thing. I had to look it up because I not that I don't trust the Simpsons as like a.
No, you probably taught like a whole generation of like grade schoolers about that.
Because I was like
the water swirl thing.
It's like a real thing. I was like, because like I was starting to get invested. I'm like, I might start calling up people in Australia just to see.
It is a real. This is the thing. It's one of those things that kids always talk about. Like kids have been talking about it since the 50s, I'm sure, and because it's one of those things you learn in 7th grade science or whatever. But the thing is, it is a real thing, but it's so mild that it doesn't actually work. Like you have to be in a lab condition. Like, this is what we learned subsequently. At the time, we didn't care. We were just like, well, we'll just put in what we thought. But subsequently, we learned that like the force of the water flushing in a toilet is what makes it swirl. But you have to be in the Coriolis effect, which is what it's called, is so mild in the northern and southern hemisphere that you have to be in a lab and you'd have to be using a microscope to see the difference between the way that the water would swirl. And also you wouldn't be able to have any pressure. Like the toilet has pressure making the water swirl in one way or another. But yeah, so it was just basically supposed to be like your kind of kids urban legend thing.
That actually has one of my favorite lines in it. It's such a random line, but when he says, water doesn't follow your rules, it goes where it wants. Like, I love that line. It's so underrated in that. But no, that honestly is one of I think that episode holds its own to this day, BART versus Australia. I think that's one you could show people who've never really watched The Simpsons too much or watched the newer episodes and be like, oh, you got to go back and watch this one. BART versus Australia is just like phenomenal. Like I said, man, you've been behind some of the greatest episodes of all time, in my opinion. That's just my humble.
Thank you.
I don't know if I matter to anyone, but it is what it is. I wanted to ask though, because showrunner, show writer, really quick before I know Trav wants to get into some Mission Hill stuff, but what's the difference between being a showrunner and show writer per se?
The showrunner is the boss, the writer is an employee.
Okay.
You know, like on TV show, the showrunner is in charge of everything. In general, the showrunner is in charge of not only the writing staff, but also in charge of who directs the episodes, how the episodes are edited, in charge of the actors. He's basically being the showrunner is like being the director, writer, and producer of a movie all together. That, you know, and it's a very, they got a lot of responsibility, you got a lot of work, you got a lot of power. The writers are one aspect of the show, you know, like, because you got the writers, producers, directors, actors, whatever. The writers are generally a group of people, and the showrunner, usually but not always, is also the head writer, meaning the showrunner determines what stories we're going to do, or he says, I want everybody to come up with a story for Lisa or whatever, and then assigns it to one of the writers. And then when the script comes in, the showrunner says, I want you to change these parts, I want you to improve these parts, we're going to take this part to the room and everyone's going to come up with a better joke here, that kind of thing. And the showrunner leads that along. Usually, sometimes there's showrunners who are not writers, but almost always it is a writer, the head writer.
Was that harder to be the showrunner and like to go from writer to showrunner, and maybe certain writers wanted certain topics and you had to be the end all be all and saying, no, I'm not giving that to you, I'm giving that to him? Did that cause any friction at all?
If it did, I don't think we heard about it. There weren't that many. It wasn't like, I don't recall that many stories that people wanted to do that didn't get done. Because usually what happened was that, remember how I said that we had those story retreats where Jim Brooks and Matt Groening would come? Yeah. That was where it got determined. Everybody would bring their story ideas. And then it would be like, you know, if Brooks didn't like the thing, you're not going to do it. So it's like, so they would all be kind of determined by consensus. Sometimes which episodes we're going to do would all be determined by which ones Matt and Jim and the showrunner liked. And then sometimes you'd assign them. Sometimes you have to assign the story to someone who didn't make it up. But generally, people got to write their own stories too. So there wasn't a lot of conflict.
That's cool. That's good to hear. Yeah. All right. Simpsons, awesome show. One of my favorites of all time to this day. Simpsons and Twilight Zone. Everyone knows that. Trav did want to touch on Mission Hill. So
great.
Yeah, I know you're excited that because last time you brought it up and we kind of just veered into The Simpsons more. So Trav,
that's okay. Mission Hill, nobody knows. Simpsons been on for 30 years. Mission Hill was on for 13 episodes.
Yep, Trav texted me, like, I love Mission Hill. I would like to ask him something.
Yeah, so I listened to the last episode that you guys did 2 years ago, and I remember you were like, you brought up Mission Hill twice to, you know, just a sea of blank faces. And I know Scott, you know, recently became friends playing basketball, and we, it's like, yeah, I like know Mission Hill. I love Mission Hill. Like I watch it, like, you know, it's 13 episodes. Actually, I wanted to talk about kind of just the episodes that didn't get made too. But yeah, I was dying to talk to you about that because that seemed like the show that was kind of that seemed more like your baby, that project. I mean, I don't want to.
It was entirely our baby.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I should chime in here just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about.
Oh, go for
because
it.
most people don't. Okay. So after Josh and I left The Simpsons in 1998, we created our own animated show. It was called Mission Hill. It was on the WB network back when that existed, but it was almost immediately canceled because by the time we finished animating the show, it had already become the Teenage Girl Network with Buffy and Roswell and Charmed, and it was no longer appropriate for the network. And then it vanished, and then it resurfaced on Adult Swim in like 2004, 2005. And they ran our 13 episodes over and over and over again for years. And they also did this in Canada. If you have any Canadian listeners, on Teletoon, which is their kind of Adult Swim cartoon network. And so the show built up it only aired late at night, and it built up this cult following, which has gotten quite large over the years. But the show is also kind of hard to find because they released it on DVD, but without the music, and they didn't, and whatever. And it's kind of a bit of lost media. Although now you can find it on YouTube and so forth. But anyway, it was Josh and my pride and joy. It was not created by Matt Groening. It was not run by James L. Brooks. It was entirely us. And Travis, as you said, yes, this was our baby.
Right. And because it seems like, especially in those first episodes, it's like he's a cartoonist. The animation is like very excessive in these cartoony things. And I was just assuming, like, because it's so focused on just this young guy trying to become a cartoonist, that it was like, that's where a lot of you were superimposing a little of yourself into that show a little bit. So I love what Mission Hill, and I was watching, and I watch it like every year or two, basically all the way through. And the thing that sticks out to me about that show is that it's such like a time capsule of the 90s, because that show, basically the world changed once you get to 9/11 and that kind of stuff, right? But so that was like right before, shit went sideways, basically. But I guess the one episode I want to talk about in particular, I guess there's a couple, but the Media Snow Day one. Do you know what I'm talking about? That is such a 90s thing, like concept to me, where it was like, didn't you hear what the president did? No one's working today. And then everyone just kind of takes off. So do you think you can go just what kind of inspired that episode? Yeah.
It's hard to describe what inspired that. But I mean, we still have those days from time to time, but they tend to be for bigger things like January 6th. Insurrection or whatever, basically. Where everybody is, you're at work, and then all of a sudden, did you hear that blank happened? And nobody works for the rest of the day, and that's the backdrop for this. And it was basically a series of intersecting stories of other stuff, because the story, it's never completely clear what's going on the Media Snow Day, and it's several intersecting stories of like Andy, our main character, having like this incredible encounter with this gorgeous actress that his dream is coming true, but it gets all fucked up by the Media Snow Day. And then everyone else has little intersecting stories that go throughout it. And it all kind of comes together because of the Grammy Awards that night, which also, like, a lot of this was pretty prescient because, like, this was before 9/11.
Yeah.
And there hadn't been a lot of things like this, episodes like that ever. And people weren't familiar with this concept at the time, really. But I think it came together as a really good episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember just days being like that, like the Monica Lewinsky thing. Like nobody, like the teachers weren't doing, like I remember playing, like when that week happened, like we were playing like Pokemon in school that day, because it was just like, who gave a shit about what's going on? Like no one's paying attention to this. And like that was kind of the level of what a Media Snow Day would be back then versus, like you said, the January 6th insurrection. And even then, I don't even feel like that was the same thing. It's just like, what happened? What? Like nobody was paying attention.
People are used to it now. People are so used to that kind of thing now that, like,
internet.
It comes at, you get a couple hours, maybe 45 minutes of people looking at the internet, and then they're back to normal because every single day now there's something like that. But this is also, remember, it's virtually pre-internet, like the Mission Hill, that we still, like, you see the Drudge Report in that episode, but there isn't there was no Twitter, and the internet was pretty primitive back in that day.
Right. So instead of Twitter being like where I don't, because there's a part where Dennis Rodman is about to make his speech to the nation or whatever. It's like, why do we care about what Dennis Rodman thinks?
But then that came true too, like with him in North Korea.
Right.
Like that's another thing that came true. Like Dennis Rodman actually does play a major role in politics from time to time.
Yeah.
He's friends with Kim Jong-un.
Who would have thought? You guys predicted things in another show, not just The Simpsons.
Yeah.
In the for the animation part of it, did you have anything to do with like the design of the characters and like how they would be portrayed? Because I feel like that goes into the writing of it. It's like the actual like universe of the animation or the setting of the show.
Yeah, that was actually, I mean, we had a lot to do with it, but the design was done by Lauren McMullen, who was basically the third, leg of the tripod. It was me and Josh and Lauren. Lauren McMullen is one of the most talented animators there is. And she had animated Simpsons episodes and King of the Hill episodes prior to this. And since then, she's gone on to, she had an Oscar nomination for animation. Yeah. She designed the whole thing kind of based on our desire to make it look like a comic book. Back in the 90s, that's why the colors are kind of misregistered. It looks like it's a somewhat badly printed color comic book, like in the main title and around the show. There was a number of really good kind of alternative comic books in the mid to late 90s that this was inspired by, as well as movies that were kind of like Kevin Smith movies around that time, things like that. It was all kind of that alternative young slacker type universe that was around in that era.
I really
but yes, it was supposed to look like that.
Yeah, I really like the way that animated shows, like, I feel like they're all different in their own way, even if they might have the same type of animations, but just like the way that their universe is constructed. Yeah. I always like to go into I like looking at the creativity of like what went behind it, like what made the person who created it to put it in that setting the way it is. So thank you.
Yeah, I think to blow our own horn, we did a great job. Lauren did a great job bringing, giving it a look that was appropriate for the style of the show. And you get that, that's when it really works well. Like South Park, I can't imagine to be you couldn't animate it any other way. King of the Hill, you couldn't animate it any other way. Family Guy, same thing. It's like, that's when the look of the show somehow encapsulates the vibe of the show. That's when things are going well. Otherwise, like a lot of shows these days, and not to crap on anyone's particular show, seem like the show was made up, then they hired somebody to animate it who had no idea what they were going for.
Yeah.
Or to design it. That just looks, there's very generic looking designs and worlds in a lot of animated shows on streaming services these days.
Sounds like the world now. When it even comes to music, it sounds like there's one rhythm, one beat, one flow in any genre at this point. It's just the simplest shit now because nobody appreciates it anymore. That's my opinion. Like, I agree with Chris is saying, like, it's so cool. It's a feeling of euphoria whether it's animation or music, when something comes into what you've wanted it to be and the design is there. There's no better feeling. There's nothing that could, like, wow, this is it. Like, this is your baby and this is the creation I envision. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
So from
one thing I wanted to, just leading into that, with just how you kind of themed the show, like one of my favorite just intros of all time is just that intro for Mission Hill, where it's just like so stylized with like him going up the elevator and then the windows kind of flipping and they're kind of changing from one window to the next. Like, if you were like, you definitely had like an idea of what the theme of the show is, and it completely kind of, without, characters saying a thing or, without any lyrics in the song, just completely gets imposed into that theme song. So like, was that like, who came up with just the idea for that theme song and that intro sequence? Was that you or?
It was Lauren. The intro sequence was entirely made up by Lauren McMullen. Okay. Just to illustrate what we had in mind for the show. And the song was made up by Cake, the musical group Cake, who we loved at that time, wrote the song. I think we were expecting them to write an entirely original song, but the song is pretty much just a remixed version of Italian Leather Sofa, which is a song of theirs that was pretty famous. Uh-huh. So, and I think when the song came in, then Lauren animated the opening in time with the song, but she made up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Trav, go on. You had one more episode to go to. I know Bill's.
So the last one is not even one that that even got kind of put on the air. It's an animatic. You can find it on YouTube of I'm pretty sure is the last episode that you guys put together, or were in the process of putting together before the show got canceled. The Crap Gets in Your Eyes episode where Andy kind of like realizes his feelings for his girlfriend. And I kind of wanted to know where you guys were in the writing process. Like, it seems like the episode is completed. It just needs to be animated. But like, were you guys kind of knowing that like this was the last thing that you were going to write, or did it kind of come suddenly, and just what kind of inspired that episode in the first place?
It was not. We didn't know it was the last thing. We thought the show that was okay. There's 13 episodes that actually got made that you've seen, and there's 5 episodes that got written and partially animated. And because this was during the absolute best part of the show, when we were delivering the episodes to the network and they were loving them, and they said we want more, and they ordered 5 new episodes to be made. And so during that time, we had a huge amount of time to make 5 episodes, and that's why I think the scripts for those are our best scripts. So what you're referring to, I think it wasn't the last one. The last one was a little bit of a cliffhanger about maybe the parents are going to force Kevin to move back to Wyoming with them because they find that there's porno movies being shot in the building. But I think you're talking about the next to last one, which was kind of a thing where Andy starts dating Jim's secretary and then realizes why his girlfriend Gwen is so special. And yeah, it was a good episode. It was very romantic. Aaron Ehasz is one of our best writers. He wrote that script. And what you're referring to is actually a recording of the reading of the script.
Correct.
That is on YouTube, and time to go with the storyboards, which are like the comic book version of the show. But it is, for anyone who likes the show, you definitely should check that out, as well as the other one, the other partially animated episode on YouTube, which is Freaky Weekend and the Crappy Wagon, which is like the road trip episode. And there's a whole act of that animated on YouTube as well.
Yeah. But yeah, like I could see that you guys were like really hitting your stride in those like the Plan 9 episode was the other one I wanted to talk about, but I know we're running low on time. But like it seems like those last couple episodes, like, oh my God, they're like now they're really hitting that vibe where it's like they're hitting that like very funny visual jokes. The jokes are happening a lot more consistently now. The characters are like they're fleshing out the side characters. Like now it's really getting going, and it's canceled. So like,
yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It is exactly what happened. It's tragic. And we attempted to bring back the show this year with the Gus and Wally spinoff, but none of the places, there's only 6 or 7 places that buy animated shows, and they're all 2 or 3 of them are going out of business and collapsing and firing everyone. And the other places didn't want it. And because of that, I also hope they will go out of business. So we were mad that the Gus and Wally show did not get picked up. But I'd be happy to talk about it. It was basically a continuation of Mission Hill.
So it was a continuation of Mission Hill, just with Gus and Wally. Is
more Gus and Wally. I mean, basically it was basically. I don't want to take up the whole podcast with this. It basically started about 6 months after. It was still pre 9/11. Started about 6 months after the original series ended, and there were a number of things, small things that had changed. But basically, the Gus and Wally story. The Gus and Wally show is basically just Mission Hill, but with more episodes like that Plan 9.
Okay. Because it's a great episode. And to everyone that doesn't know what's going on here, so Gus and Wally in that show are like this elderly gay couple. And one of them, the kind of more effeminate one, is voiced by Tom Kenny, as he voiced many characters in that show. And it's pre-SpongeBob, and I guess he's just figuring out the SpongeBob voice there. But
the SpongeBob voice is in a different episode. By the way, this is a piece of trivia. It's not that episode. It's episode 5 where they go to the sci-fi convention, and there's that guy, the little person, the Ewok, Jimmy Briskin. That is the SpongeBob voice before SpongeBob.
That's the fully realized SpongeBob voices when he's doing that Ewok thing. But
I could openly say that you may have found your like #1 Mission Hill fan of all time. I'm
excited. I could go on for hours about this with Travis, but that seems like a different podcast.
Yeah. But I know you're running low on time. Last roundtable thing. I just want to ask one thing. A little preview to your STEAMIE Awards, which will be announced at the end of the year. Is there any sandwich you had at this point you could tease that we should stay away from?
You know, I haven't had anything that really sucked this year. I have and I'll tell you, well, first of all, I don't go out of my way to buy things that suck. But in general, I do. If it was a major fast food chain, I would want to try it. This is what I think is going to happen with Burger King.
Okay.
That I think we're going to get something that sucks pretty soon at Burger King, because what happened is they introduced this sandwich, that Chiking sandwich, which was their crispy chicken sandwich, which was excellent and was rivaled Popeyes, because Popeyes is owned by the same company as Burger King. They use the same recipe essentially, and it was the best thing on the Burger King menu. Apparently, it was a huge flop, and they're getting rid of it. So, and they're bringing in a new, cheaper, easier to make chicken sandwich that I think is going to suck. And I think it starts this week, as a matter of fact. So I'll be out there looking for that. It's unfortunate that they got rid of their best sandwich because it was a marketing failure, but I anticipate the replacement, which is basically going to be cheaper and easier for them to make, is going to be a big, big disappointment.
All right, so I'll look out for that. Bill, as usual, man, thanks for coming on, but I'll do one last roundtable. Trav, you got any last words for Bill?
Yeah, I mean, Bill, thank you for just fielding my questions. I'm a huge fan of pretty much everything you've ever done in your life, so this has been big for me.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, the big thing I wanted to leave you with before we go is because you keep talking about this fast food review stuff. Have you ever watched Report of the Week on YouTube? Have you ever heard of that guy?
Of course, I'm very familiar with that guy. He's the king of this. He and Game Drops are the kings of this genre, and they're the reasons I don't do it on YouTube. I only do it on Instagram mainly, because I can't compete with guys who have 2 million followers on YouTube. Those guys have been doing it for years. Report of the Week, I respect immensely. And he does the same thing, but he does longer versions of it, and he's also kind of a character in himself, as I'm sure you know. But yeah, I have watched him, and I have watched Dame Drops, who is the guy who invented this genre and had a show on Netflix last year, kind of about it. So those guys, yes, obviously, I aspire to have 2 million followers, and we'll get there someday with the help of guys like you.
Okay,
thank you, Chris. Go on.
I just want to say it was a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, you wrote a lot of your stuff before my time. I'm a little young, but going back and watching some of the content that you put out, it really made me laugh, and I just want to tell you that. And just real quick before you go, because I like a lot of food myself. What's your favorite fast food chicken sandwich?
This is a whole discussion, but I will tell you the short version is that it's Popeyes.
Okay.
Popeyes. Nobody has beaten Popeyes. Burger King came close with the Chiking, but that's gone now because they were using the Popeyes recipe. I will also say that for the very first time last week, I had Zaxby's, which is, and you probably don't have Zaxby's.
No, they're
yeah.
Oh, okay. Zaxby's, I would say, maybe a tie. Their signature chicken sandwich for Popeyes.
Okay.
And if you want to know the winners, which I'm sure will be in the running, you could watch Bill's Instagrams at the end of the year where he does the announcements. And
not only that, you don't have to wait. You can join the Steve Ham Society today.
I can
discuss it with me online for as little as $5 a month.
That is true.
We'll go into a deep dive.
There's something about the reveal though that I love, like at the end of the year where you put the suit on. Well, you're the top half of the suit on.
The pageantry of it all is part of there's a December tradition.
It really does just work. But anyway, Bill, thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you on in January for the STEAMIE Awards review again if you're willing to come on. So
absolutely, of course.